not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow down.
Let my people go.
We will not bow
Hello and welcome to episode 52 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how are you doing?
Okay, Dan. The snow's been something new and refreshing, made the world look a little bit brighter and cleaner. How are you in these locked down times?
Well, it's not been as nice to go out at all recently because of the snow, and it's a bit colder than I'd like. But yeah, not too bad. So, Mike, what have we got to discuss today?
So today we're talking as a regular slot about COVID and the lockdown exit strategy. We're talking about Croydon Council, an upcoming referendum, and the other developments there. And we're talking about the Labour Party and how maybe it's not woke enough for some.
Indeed, yes. So the vaccine rollout continues. Over 14 million first doses have now been given to those people over the age of 70 and with certain pre-existing conditions. We are on the verge of the date when all of those people are supposed to have been offered a vaccine. So we'll see whether the government meets its target of, I think it's around about 15 million people are supposed to be in that list. Talk of schools reopening on the 8th of March. But yeah, it's not quite clear what the route out of all of this is at the moment. Talk of immunity passports, whether you'll be allowed to go on holiday at all in the summer. Different ministers have said different things. Some have said, "Oh, I wouldn't book anything." And there's talk of people, if you come into the country, you have to get put up in a hotel for a couple of weeks. Even talk of if you don't fill out your declaration properly when you come back into the country, that you could go to prison for 10 years. So a lot of confusion at the moment from the government. Mike, what have you made of the latest developments?
Well, the imprisonment, which is an outrageous punishment for what that crime would be, has at least driven some great memes of Shawshank Redemption clips of people saying, "So, what are you in here for?" You know, I went to the Algarve and things like that. It's quite government run amok. You do sense that these people have got a little bit too used to their powers, and for me that particularly brings us on to the immunity passports. The stories today in the Sunday Times and the Spectator about suggesting that this is happening and the contracts have been written, that immunity passports are coming. I personally consider that utterly beyond the power of all of the things the government could do. If they're bringing in a de facto forced medication of people, there's a reason that's against the human rights, the UN Bill of Human Rights, is because the last people to do that were, frankly, literally Nazis. This would be abhorrent if our government were to do that. And other countries might say you need to have vaccines to come into their country. That's fair enough. We're used to that. And for people from another country, if you want to travel, they get to set the rules. And I think we should be able to set the rules for the people coming here. But within your own country, for the enforcement officers of the state to demand your papers and demand that you've had the right injections would be utterly appalling. When we spoke last time, I thought things were looking good in a way. As you've mentioned, the vaccines are getting there; they're coming out. The local elections have been announced, and that's that suggests they think that the world's opening up. And they'd announced that on I think it was the 22nd of February they're due to announce the exit strategy. But since then they've said it's the week of the 22nd. To say we've talked about immunity passports, this imprisonment if you dare to go outside the country. Can you? It makes you think they're backsliding. Just interesting on that. You're not allowed to travel outside the country at the moment without express consent of the government. From our youth, Dan, can you remember anywhere like that, and anywhere that people were looking for freedom from to get away from that kind of regime?
I think there was a little thing called the Iron Curtain, and it was mostly the people who lived behind the Iron Curtain who were not allowed to travel to the west without, as you say, some sort of express permission from the Politburo to be allowed to do so. So yeah, it's not good in that respect. And the immunity passports. I mean, as you say, if another country says, well, you've got to have XYZ jabs to get into the country, well, we know that some countries are like that, and it's probably beneficial to do it with some countries where there are, nasty conditions in those countries and diseases that are rampant there anyway. So I'm not necessarily against that ultimately, because that's up to them. But the idea that you need to be able to evidence your immunity to be able to go to the cinema or something like that, it is a bit beyond the pale, really. Now, my particular concern there is that the government or members of the government only a week or so ago were saying that there was going to be no immunity passports. Then, a couple of days later, another government minister says, oh, well, actually, there might be. And it turns out that there's been companies who have been engaged in looking into this and developing systems. So it's not that far away from actually happening. And if it is limited to being able to fly abroad or something like that, well, okay, that's one thing. But if anything to do with whether you can go to the pub or not, it's just ludicrous, really.
I'm totally sorry. I was just going to say, there are going to be a certain number of people that can't have these injections for whatever medical reason. There are certain people that object to them on religious grounds. Personally, I'm probably going to have one as soon as they call me up. I can't imagine I'm going to put any effort into getting the call up, but at some point, no doubt the doctors will contact me. And that's fine. That's my choice. And there's the key word, isn't it? Choice. There are people that say that can't have it. Are they second-class citizens from now on? Do we put little stars on them? I don't know. There are people who on religious grounds don't want it. Do we just say some religions are become persona non grata and they're not allowed to be free to citizens in our country? It's more than. I mean, I don't. If this sort of thing comes in, and you sort of sounds ludicrous, but we're in a world of the ludicrous. I don't think being a member of the Conservative Party, you can inoculate yourself from this if you stay a member and they bring in something like this. It really is, yeah, I find it quite terrifying.
Well, you mentioned the Conservative Party there. There are apparently 63 Tory MPs who are potentially going to rebel against the government if they try to extend the current laws, which are due for renewal or repeal in March. The COVID recovery group are demanding that all restrictions be removed by the end of April. So we will see, and they say that once the first groups of people are vaccinated, then there's no reason to not start to ease the restrictions and certainly remove them all by the end of April if the rollout of vaccines continues at the pace that it is. And they're demanding that famous cost-benefit analysis for the government to justify anything that they want to do if they're going to continue to remove our liberties. Whether or not anything comes of this, it's at least good to see some people actually standing up to the government, because certainly, and we may talk about this later, the official opposition is doing nothing of the sort.
No, absolutely. And this is certainly why I thought, and I voted Conservative at the last election, thinking that they would be the party that stood up for freedom and liberty. Boris was a sort of a closet libertarian, and people like Steve Baker and numerous others would be on our side in these kind of fights, and they would do lots of policies I didn't fully agree with, but they were on our side when it came for the fight for freedom, and yeah, it is about time they stood up and got counted on that one. Otherwise, the clique in power, what possible reason would they have to give it up? It does feel like Sage has somewhat taken the government hostage. And yeah, it's about time MPs stood up and got counted on it.
Indeed. Well, talking of cliques in power, that moves us on very nicely to our, our next subject, which is Croydon Council.
We're working well on these links, aren't we?
It seems to be. We've spoken before about Democ, the campaign for a democratically elected mayor for Croydon, and how they had got the required number of signatures to call for a referendum, but the council, perhaps using the COVID regulations, were not too keen on holding that referendum anytime soon. Well, it's going to happen. It now looks like it's going to happen in October. It will be a standalone referendum, so it won't be taking place at the same time as the GLA elections, which do now appear to be going to take place in May, having been delayed by a whole year. So it is going to cost some more money, but it does look, Mike, as if it is actually going to be going ahead.
Yeah, so I should declare, and as I've mentioned before, I now was involved in the Democ campaign. I was on the committee for that. I'm not involved actively anymore. Other priorities, and frankly, there's only so many hours in the day. But good luck to them. Yes, they've got the referendum. It was probably due for May. I'm actually surprised the council have gone for October. I think their hope to remain with the current strong leader model is best served by having an election with other elections. So you go along in May and you vote for the mayor of London and whatever else, and you also happen to vote for a mayor or not in a referendum. And presumably in May there will be a lot of Labour voters turn out, and people will vote for Khan most likely, and probably against the mayor of Croydon, because that's what the Labour parties in Croydon's asked them to do, I'm guessing. Come October, I sort of feel the only people who are likely to turn up to vote are the people who are deliberately voting for a mayor. I think it's unlikely you're going to bother to vote against something, particularly when the council has hardly given you a reason to vote in the way it's asked you to. So yeah, it's an odd choice, it seems to me. I think they're trying to muddy the waters a bit with the election. I think they're also going to make some other offers in it and see if we can change again the way so rather than the strong leader model they have today or a mayor, they're going to try and give some other offer in it. And just dilute it. But yeah, a referendum's definitely going ahead. Obviously, Dan, you and I have a little bit of experience on referendums in Croydon. You got any thoughts on how the vote might go and where the various sides of the campaign might be best to focus?
Well, yes, it is going to be interesting in this one. As you say, it's not 100% clear at the moment that it's going to be an elected mayor versus the status quo. That's what it probably ought to be, but it's not completely clear that those are going to be the two options given. But I suppose if I was on the side of keeping the status quo, I'd probably be encouraging lots of people to apply for a postal vote. But if I was on the side of change in this instance, I would probably be looking to campaign in the suburbs, I guess, is probably your best bet. But it will be interesting to see how those campaigns are formed. Now, in the sort of the referendum that we had on the EU, it was a much bigger thing, and there were two official campaigns. So it'll be interesting to see who runs the status quo campaign, if indeed that is what it is. Will it essentially be the local Labour Party? It might be, albeit, of course, as we know, Croydon South Labour Party actually support the idea of a democratically elected mayor. And again, who will be leading the charge for change? Will it be the people who have currently set up the campaign, that is the campaign to get a referendum, or will it be another group of people who are perhaps more experienced in getting out the vote? Because it is a different thing, isn't it? It's previously it was about physically getting signatures to get on the petition to achieve that actual referendum, albeit hampered, as it were, by COVID and what have you. But that was the target, to actually get people to get out and vote. Is a different matter altogether, albeit, as you say, I think that the motivation factor will probably be there with people who want change, rather than people who don't, and whether people are going to be that interested in something of this nature on the scale that you would expect in a local elections or a mayoral election or a general election. I very much doubt it. So it'll be about getting out the vote, I think, because people are obviously not going to be happy with what's gone on with the local council in recent times, due to the basically going bankrupt. But of course, the alternative could be the current model, but with an alternative council. People might think that that's a better idea. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go about it. And of course, I suspect that nothing really will happen with all of this until after the GLA elections in May. But we may have quite a vigorous campaign over the summer and the first part of autumn here in Croydon. So it'll be interesting to see how they all do with that.
Indeed, and I guess there's assuming by that point, of course, that we're allowed to campaign over the summer, and no people are no longer being arrested for campaigning, as appears to be happening to some of the people campaigning for London Mayor at the moment.
Indeed, yes. So there will have to be persuasion, whether that's street stalls or public meetings or knocking on doors or what have you. I don't think that an air campaign, as it's often referred to, will work necessarily in this instance.
No, indeed. You make an interesting point there. So Democ held a lot of street stalls. We've done a lot of knocking on doors, and we pushed a lot of leaflets. But actually, one of the most effective things we did was hold some public meetings. That was a way of getting into an area, inviting people from the area into an event, and generally creating a sort of sense of community around it, and being able to give some speeches and what have you. Even if the pubs are open, even if the restaurants are open, even if small crowds are allowed back into football grounds and what have you, I'm not terribly convinced that in, let's say, July and September, schools will be allowing you to hire out a hall, or churches, what have you, to pack a public meeting, or a lot of people will be going to it. I hope it. I passionately hope that they are, but I'm just not convinced that sort of model will be available again. Likewise, knocking on people's doors doesn't feel like that's a thing we're going to quickly return to. Leafleting, I guess we would, but it's going to be a very different campaign we see, both probably for the GLA elections and I suspect for the Democ referendum.
Yes, it's going to be challenging all round. Well, that's not the only news about Croydon Council. No. The previous strong leader of Croydon Council, Councillor Tony Newman, has apparently been suspended from the Labour Party. Mike, can you tell the listeners what seems to have gone on with him and another councillor?
Well, I think certainly in the case of Councillor Newman, you would need a heart of stone not to laugh. This man who led the council whilst it went bankrupt, who never knowingly took the opportunity to not knock his opponents and appear to me, it seemed to me, fairly smug, has been administratively suspended by the Labour Party nationally, along with Simon Hall, who was the finance cabinet member. It should be noted, and if it feels like I'm having a go at someone when they're down, it should be noted the Local Government Chronicle reported from one of the Labour councillors. So these are the people that elected Newman into his position, saying that the culture of the cabinet at that time was one of shocking bullying, and if you challenged their authority, you were sacked. So that's one person's quote, but it is something you heard rumours of, and obviously it's never gone to this kind of level before. Labour Party have suspended them. We don't know what will happen next. Of course, they are still receiving their allowances as councillors, so we're still paying them. But it does seem odd to me, having led the council to bankruptcy, that this leader and other members of that cabinet are well, in fact, in charge of the council now. But those that took the financial decisions, particularly, are still members of the Labour group in Croydon Council. I would have thought they should have stood up and suspended them before now.
You would have thought so. But it's not just a couple of councillors who have been suspended, allegedly. The aforementioned Local Government Chronicle has reported on the 9th of February that the Director of Finance, Lisa Taylor, the Executive Director of Place, Shafia Mustafa, Executive Director of Localities, Hazel Simmons, and Executive Director of Health, Wellbeing and Adults, Guy Van de Schell, have all been suspended from their duties. So that's 4 down, and apparently there's another person who's currently on sick leave who they understand will be suspended when they return. An interesting development. Obviously, this comes off the back of the Section 114 notice that was issued last year, essentially declaring the council bankrupt. Now, Mike, we've previously discussed the extremely high pay of a number of Croydon's executive directors, etc. And seems like a little too little, too late, as far as I'm concerned.
It's interesting. One of the things that's come out, we've been campaigning for a long time about the high pay of Croydon's executives, and now we see a number of the senior people in Croydon Council be suspended following a report into the bankruptcy of the council. We've recently seen from the Taxpayers Alliance a report into the allowances of councillors that saw Croydon Council as the highest per councillor average allowance in London and the 3rd highest in England. And we see councillors being administratively suspended by their party and part of a culture of bullying and or allegedly part of a culture of bullying, and of course they drove the council to bankruptcy. It's telling in just how many levels the failure has been in Croydon. They've taken the money for them and the execs, it appears. They've spent the money on grandiose plans that have completely failed. They failed to secure Westfield, which was kind of the one thing they absolutely had to do. We're never really likely to see that now. And we're now seeing libraries, pools, tips, transport services in schools closing and ending because of the complete hash of management of these people. You might excuse 1 or 2 failures. You might say they tried and failed, they've done their best. But when absolutely everything about that administration was appalling, it really does wave a red flag to you, just what the hell was going on there. But also, why did no one stand up against it? There are 41 Labour councillors. There is allegedly a cabal of about 6 or 8 that ran this group, or 6, I think, sorry, more like 4 or 6 that ran this group. What were the rest of them doing? What are they doing now? How can they stay there in good conscience as all this information comes out? It's beyond me.
Indeed. Well, Labour in Croydon may be having its struggles, but the Labour Party nationally isn't doing too well. Till recently, there was a bit of a poll lead there for Keir Starmer, obviously against a backdrop of almost a year of COVID restrictions, so not totally surprising. But that lead does seem to have disappeared now. Poor Keir. I mean, he can't do right for doing wrong at the moment. He's obviously tried to make the Labour Party seem like more of a centrist party following the demise of Jeremy Corbyn, but he's not doing too well. It seems that back when he was looking to become the leader of the Labour Party back in February of last year, that he was, well, basically talking about the abolition of capitalism. Footage has emerged of a conversation he had with the very left-wing mayor of the north of Tyne, Jamie Driscoll, in which he says that he says the following: I think we've got to have the courage to say the economic system, the free market economic system, is busted and needs to be replaced with a new economic system or model where government sets the direction and sets the framework. So whatever Mr. Starmer believes, certainly when he was talking to a very left-wing member of the Labour Party, and when, of course, he was seeking the leadership of a fairly left-wing membership of the Labour Party, he was quite prepared to dump capitalism. Mike, what have you made of that?
You know, I'm recall a conversation I had with someone in the Labour Party, and I don't want to say who, but someone fairly prominent locally, who'd said they were facing a choice of who to vote for, and they looked at Keir Starmer, and everyone's telling them that he's saying all the right left wing things, but he doesn't really mean that. He'd be much better in power, and I think I'd indicated this to them, and then he said, well, so what you're saying is I should vote for him because he's lying to us. That doesn't really fill me with joy. And I thought, it's a fair point, that. And that does appear to be what Keir Starmer possibly was doing at that time. Just an important part of this quote here. You say, the courage to say the economic system, the free market economic system, is busted and needs to be replaced. There's a key word in that. It's free. It's a free choice. We're sitting here recording this. I've got a Dell laptop and a cheap monitor, and I was trying to work this out earlier. Make it is, but I can't see what it says. And I chose to buy them, and I chose to spend a bit more on one, a bit less on the other, and I chose to buy them online. And I didn't get given the government issued computer. I didn't get given the government issued monitor or setting. I didn't have to buy it from the government store. It's a free market. I chose to go to the place that most suited me to get these products. Keir Starmer wants to change that. Just bear in mind again, Keir Starmer wants to change that. If this weekend, you went shopping and you went to Sainsbury's rather than Tesco's, or Lidl rather than LD, or Waitrose rather than Sparks, or wherever you happen to go, that you chose to go because that's the supermarket you like, Keir Starmer's saying that's the system that needs to be changed and needs to be replaced with a new economic system where the government sets the direction and sets the framework. That's been tried before. It wasn't a roaring success, as I recall. They won't ever say that's what they mean, but to be clear, that's what they mean. That's pretty frightening.
Indeed, and he was prepared to say that to get votes from Labour Party members. Whether or not he believes in it or not is another matter. But he's certainly not doing too well with some members of the Labour Party nowadays. He's even been censured by an old group. He used to be in the Haldane group of socialist lawyers. Have censured him, so he's not doing down too well with them, and even some Labour black activist groups have decided to go on strike from campaigning from the party. Now, bear in mind that Keir Starmer took a knee famously during the Black Lives Matter protests in the last summer. They have accused Starmer of pushing issues of anti-black racism and Islamophobia way down the pecking order. Mike, he seemed pretty woke, last year. Not woke enough for some, by the sound of it.
Interestingly, look, I was watching the video of that earlier of the groups that are refusing to going on strike. One of the chaps on there mentioned as a sitting councillor, and you think, well, that makes you a fairly significant person. You're not just some random member, and you're saying you're going on strike from campaigning, which first of all makes you wonder, how's that as a way to repay all of those people that no doubt campaigned for you. I also did wonder where these people were during the time that Jeremy Corbyn was in charge of the party. If they were complaining that Labour's there's a line something like, if Labour isn't anti-racist, then what is it? And you think, well, you were in it when Jeremy Corbyn was in charge. What were you doing about that time? But anyhow, Starmer is caught in a real problem, and it's Paul Emery talks about Labour being a mixture of the city and the lovies and the working class areas. Starmer knows that he needs to win those working class areas if he ever wants to be back in power. But unfortunately, a lot of the pull of the Labour Party and the membership is in London. It's very woke. And it's in the other city centres and very woke. And the two really don't get on with each other. I don't know how he squares that circle, and he's struggling with it. It does seem as well to me, Keir Starmer's not been very good at reading the crowd and reading the future. He's been constantly asking for more lockdown. At the point we eventually get out of this lockdown, people are going to remember, are not going to have been happy about it. We're not going to look back with it in fond memories, I don't think. And Starmer's going to be the person who historically was on the side of making it worse. At the time he took the knee, I think most of us were saying, look, the future for a group that says the people of England have got to start taking the knee every so often, that's not going to be a good, bright future for that group. That's never likely to go down well with most people. And that seems to be panning out now. We've even seen Wilfred Zaha, Palace player, come out against it today. There's been a lot of reaction to the mixed factor of taking the knee for rugby players. Starmer's, that image will always follow him because at the moment that mattered, he chose to do what I think is going to prove to be a very unpopular choice. And now he's trying to square this circle in certain other areas, and he's fighting against people in the party. If he was brave, I think that the smart thing to do would actually be to try and cast some of these groups aside and say, actually, this is what we're doing. This is the vision we're setting out. And if it offends you, you can say we're going to do stuff that meets some of their agenda, but say also we're very proud of our country, our history. And if that offends you, maybe the Labour Party isn't for you. He needs that clause 4 moment. There was something I was saw earlier. There's a sitting Labour, a Labour minister, in fact, has come out, and let me check which one it is. Alex Sobel, the shadow cultural media and sports minister, wants MX on documents as an alternative to Mr. and Mrs. Come out, and Patrick O'Flynn was tweeting about it, saying this is the sort of thing they need to get rid of. And there is a point here. Is Starmer going to stand up to be the party of the people or the party of pronouns? And actually, here's a good line where you can say, okay, we'll do something to help groups, transgender groups and what have you. But actually, it's Mr. or Mrs. Those are the terms we use. We're not playing with that, a line in the sand, and actually take a stand on something that might be popular. I'm not sure he's got it in him, Dan. I don't know. You obviously grew up around a very Labour area. How do you see him getting back into such places?
Well, in actual fact, where I'm originally from, actually voted Labour still in the general election, but a lot of places around are unlikely to do so. That they may end up voting Labour just because if the Conservatives just make a hash of things, but they certainly won't be attracted to some of the things which the Labour Party are coming out with at the moment. And Starmer really needs to stand up against these sort of things. But no particular sign that he's really going to. You mentioned sort of London-related issues. Well, Sadiq Khan has set up now a commission for diversity in the public realm. This commission is going to look at street names and statues around London and recommend whether or not they should be changed or torn down. Well, this commission, it looks like a right motley crew that he's assembled. One of the people that he's put onto this commission is a chap called Toyin Agbetu, who openly, and this is all over the internet, it's all available on video. He heckled the Queen and the Archbishop of Canterbury, yelling that they should apologise for slavery and that they should be ashamed of themselves. And the list of others who are on this commission doesn't look to me to be truly balanced of the people who are interested in the history of our country and of our capital city. And Mike, Sadiq Khan, who unfortunately, the odds are, will remain mayor of London after the upcoming elections in May, he's certainly not doing anything to help Starmer win back votes in the old Red Wall.
You wonder whether he's playing a game to effectively try and bring about the downfall of Starmer's turn, so he can go back to Westminster and take over the leadership. It's the most charitable reason I can think of for thinking why he's doing what he's doing. I'm sure it's pretty popular in London, although frankly, when you look at that commission, I'm not even sure how popular that will be in a fairly woke city in the wokest elements of London. Yeah, and yet clearly it's going to hurt Labour nationally. You wonder what his purpose is there. The bit I particularly like in the video of this gentleman, this bloke, that's because he's not a gentleman, who heckling the Queen, was where he squared up to the security guard and saying, "I'll punch you." Oh, particularly nice response. I thought they reacted frankly too softly with him, but there we go. Utterly bizarre. Sadiq Khan is the ultimate divider, really, isn't he? He's no doubt huge. In fact, ad hoc conversations I have with people, anecdotal conversations. That's a phrase I was looking for. He's very popular with Labour voters in London, it seems to me, but he really does seem to go out of his way to wind up anyone that isn't on his side.
Indeed. We've just got to hope. Well, we can hope that he isn't returned, although it looks like he will be. But we've just got to, I think, hope that some GLA members will be elected who are not prepared to put up with this nonsense, and can at least somewhat hold him to account. But if this commission is made up of these sort of people, and listeners, please do go and look this up to see who these characters are. They're certainly not going to be looking at these things from a balanced perspective. He's basically trying to overturn history, and it's not welcome at all. We just got to hope that people are prepared to stand up for our history in our capital city. Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories that you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter @CroydonConst, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalist@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the pubcast and the YouTube channel. Please do like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. I'd like to thank Mike for taking some time out of his no doubt busy lockdown life for joining me today on the podcast.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you all for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Stay safe, everybody.